have a relatively good co-host. Bobby, how are you today?
Co-host of the year.
Yeah, I don't give you enough credit. Co-host of the year, and then future mayor after that. So you've a strong trajectory in your future,
A
Robert.
strong resume for co-host.
Strong resume for co-host for sure. So our guest today is Ryan Brownlee. He is currently a director with the ABCA and former journeyman baseball coach. So Evansville native, coached 2 seasons with the University of Evansville, then moved to James Madison, coached at Iowa, and then was at Western Illinois for a long time. Ryan, how are you, sir?
Great to be here, Dan and Bobby. Appreciate it. Appreciated the reach out to come on, so I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and you and I crossed paths a couple years ago. You came to one of my showcases, right?
Yes. Yep.
How did we do? How did we? I'm actually wearing it because I went for a run today. But how would you rate my camp, Ryan?
I think every camp is great. They all are run different, but it's like anything else. You're going to get out of it what you put into it. I fully expected that you're going to get at least something out of it. It may not be on the player side, but you're going to see how things are run. Was lucky to go all over the country and watch how different people ran things. And I think anybody can do things better, but I try to not be judgmental on things because I think everything has value. And I always probably took one or two names out of everyone I went to. But the other thing, and I think the higher level recruiting coordinators or guys that have been doing it for a while will tell you, is it's more important to cross names off. Mm-hmm. I feel for the guys right now that are trying to do this virtually, because I think you're having a hard time crossing people off because you're not going to get a great look and you're trying to do it through a screen. I know the older guys are used to going to the ballpark and watching and seeing how kids interact, but to be able to talk to the coaches, I think they're losing it. But baseball guys are great at adjusting on the fly. The whole community has had to adjust with what's going on. And I think you see people that are thriving, you see organizations that are thriving, that have had to pivot in this time. But you're not surprised by the baseball community. That's the baseball community at its finest, is
for sure
taking the cards that you're dealt and playing them, whatever that means. I have so much respect for baseball guys.
I mean, that's what baseball teaches you, right? I mean, all the bloopers that fall in, all the line drives that get caught. It's rolling with the good and the bad luck.
What a frustrating sport it is.
But that's the beautiful thing about baseball and the ones that play for a long time or the ones that coach for a long time, I think that's what brings you back to baseball, is the failure part of it. Because when something goes right, then, it's like making a putt or whatever you want to use an analogy, but that's what brings you back to the sport, coaching, playing, is because the failure part of it, the ones that are good, that are mentally strong, that can handle it. And yes, it weeds people out that can adjust. And, I have my 17-year-old, that was part of the reason why he stopped playing, is because the failure part of it. And he runs track and he's going to be successful in whatever he decides to do, but it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
But those that stay in it, it's phenomenal, because that is what brings you back to baseball, is just that little glimpse every once in a while that something goes right. And then it's like, okay, I'm searching for that next time that's going to go right.
Yeah. Just like Bobby grinding it out until you finally got your chance to pitch.
Oh, is that not the dream? That is the position player dream.
Speaking of which, did you see Todd Frazier get out there and throw knuckleballs?
He was nasty.
Filthy. Well, did you see DeGrom was tinkering around with it in the bullpen?
Of course he was.
And then you're thinking, okay, there's a good way for that guy to blow his arm out, because it's all decelerated. He's changed his arm angle, trying to tinker around with a knuckleball. And it's like, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, like, good. I'm interested to see how his next outing is, because he's tinkering around with a knuckleball and he'll still go shove. But it's like, why? You are the best pitcher. You're the best pitcher in baseball, and you don't need to tweak anything right now. Why are you tinkering around with a knuckleball? But that's how pitchers and position players are. the good ones, they think, okay, well, maybe if I add this to my arsenal, it might take me to a different level, which it'll be intriguing to see.
It's like pitchers BP. Throw a shutout, the whole staff gets around to BP.
Yes,
that's the dream. I think it's also the dream for the pitchers not to have to shag for that round.
Exactly.
That's the bigger deal for sure. Because the 5 or 6 swings are always a letdown. You're always like,
of course,
I'm gonna juice a couple, then you like hit 2 off the end, you roll over 2 more, and you're like, this has been a waste.
You've wasted your
all this lead up.
Well, it's a waste for everybody. It's a waste for them. It's a waste for the position players. It's a waste for the coaches. But it's also, there's some tradition to it.
And they owe us for shagging every day.
Well, then maybe that gets you your next shutout. I mean, that's the way you think about it. Okay, you may not want to do it, but if they just posted a shutout, maybe you let them do it because maybe that gets you your next shutout.
You got to keep the pitchers happy. We're a very temperamental, cranky, spacey group, so you got to keep us in.
And how did you two get connected?
We were teammates for what, 4 weeks, and in all rights, being a pitcher and a position player, we played together in Camden in 2014. And like position players and pitchers don't interact nearly as much. Like you stay with your group, and we were only teammates for like a month. Like in all rights, we should have like faded away and like not been friends after that, because that's just like, everyone just goes their separate ways after the season.
You get to choose your friends after the season.
I always tried to put position players and pitchers in the dorm rooms together. My freshman dorm mate was Kyle Ritter, who was a pitcher, and he helped me immensely in college handle the ups and downs because we could talk about things. And I think you need somebody outside your comfort zone or outside your peer group. I think it's great for pitchers and position players to interact with each other because they're going to bring a different perspective. You can't see the forest for the trees sometimes. And I think when you just talk to position players all the time, or if you're a pitcher and you just talk to pitchers all the time, I think you lose some of that perspective. And I think getting those cross perspectives helps you as a player.
Yeah, agreed. And you played a little bit of pro ball with Evansville. We both wore the same jersey at different points. It sounds like you were there.
Love the Otters. We had a great season. Yeah, Greg Taggart, summer of '97, got done playing. Had a really great playing experience at Evansville. Socially, academically, it was a great fit for me. It's a different time now. I was lucky I got to see 5 schools, take 5 visits. It took me a long time to make a decision. I had graduated from high school and was playing in the state championship for Memorial High School for Quentin Merkel, who coached Don Mattingly. My baseball tradition at my high school was tremendous. Lost 5 games in high school with Memorial High School. Yeah, it's crazy to think about that. That class we had, we lost 5 games going through from freshman. You didn't play varsity until you were maybe a junior, but lost 5 games in my entire high school career with Memorial. We lost 2 games.
It's a long weekend for me and Bobby.
We lost my 1 game my junior year in the day game in the state championship with a really talented team of older seniors that were a lot of guys going to play college at different levels. And then that carried over into Evansville's program. My dad had a really good relationship with Coach Merkel, but they both were very similar personalities, really hard. And so I think my dad probably knew that if he took a player from Memorial, he was at least going to be able to handle him and how he handled things. You look at the record books at the University of Evansville, there's a lot of Memorial grads that are on the hitting side, not as much on the pitching. But there's been some really good players come out of that Southern Indiana area at that time. Scott Rowland was at Jasper. Jamie Carroll played 11 years in the big leagues. The Bennis brothers grew up in Evansville. And then on other sports too, Calvert Chaney was the Big Ten scoring leader. Kevin Hardy played linebacker for the Jags. Walter McCarty played for the Celtics. It was a really cool area for all athletics back then.
And of course, you guys have the gem of the ballpark down there. So for those of you who don't know, Bossey Field is I think it's the third oldest ballpark in America, right? And that's
behind Fenway and Wrigley Field. Yeah. It had its 100-year anniversary, I think, 2 years ago. If you're a baseball, especially an old baseball fan and like old stadiums,
It's a cool
you know,
park.
it's one of those birthday cake stadiums. It doesn't wrap all the way around, but the concourse area has that birthday cake feel to it. And it's neat. A lot of tradition. The Evansville triplets played there.
Wait, I'm nodding my head, but I have no idea what you mean by birthday cake. What does that mean?
You know, well, back in the old days, like the Pirate Stadium, the Red Stadium, they called them birthday cake because they were all the way wrapped around, and from the outside they looked like birthday cakes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but yeah, the Otters. I owe Greg Taggart a lot. You know, you're disappointed when you don't get drafted. I had played in the Cape. That's how bad I was. I was one of the few guys that actually played in the Cape and was not drafted. And so you're disappointed. And I didn't know if I wanted to even play for the Otters. So I was like 2 weeks in, and I'm still working out, maybe thinking that somebody's going to call to sign me. And, you know, we all come to that realization that the phone's not ringing. So I was like, I still want to play. So I tried out. I don't know if they weren't going to take me because I was a local kid, and I get it. You know, it's a little bit like recruiting someone locally. They have to be good enough, because if they're not good enough to play for you and they're a local kid, you're going to have issues in the community. So I think that's probably what it was on the Otters' part. So I did try out. They kept me. It was no guarantees that I was going to stay. I could have gotten released any day, but played really well, and they ended up releasing a couple infielders. And Greg Taggart was tremendous. I think he's he's still doing it. He's with Gary. I think he has the perfect demeanor for guys that either never got a chance or just got released. So everybody's disgruntled because they're mad at organized baseball that they didn't get an opportunity or they got released. And I was fine with being done with playing after that summer. He asked me to come back the next summer, but I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had 2 classes left to finish at Evansville after I graduated. And my dad asked me to coach, and I never thought I was going to coach. Up until I started coaching at Evansville, I could have told you that I was not going to coach. I was going to go either be a professor. I knew it was probably going to be something at the college level, education wise. Might have been a professor, might have been an admissions director, but it was not going to be coaching. And then immediately, as soon as I started coaching, I was like, I love this. I can't see myself doing anything else. Just hard when you're coaching guys that you played with. Anybody that had to do it understands what you're saying, because your teammates know your BS. Like, they've seen you away from the field. They've seen you in the house. They've seen you in the apartment. But I think because I was a good enough teammate and for the most part did things right, worked out hard, was a good student, you have to have that balance with the guys that you coached, and you have to set guidelines. Like, I did not hang out. That was hard for me. I did not hang out with the guys that I played
you have
with.
to draw a really hard line.
But I had seen it with my brother. My brother was 4 years older, coached me at Evansville as well. He and I set guidelines. And people that don't understand this won't get it. The only time my brother and I would hang out, and we had cross friends. I had friends that were older that were my brother's peer group, because we all hung out together in Evansville. The only time my brother and I could actually hang out socially was Christmas break. Other than that, it was coach to player relationship. And my brother and I butted heads a lot. But I ended up being a good player in college because of my dad and brother and how hard they were on me. You know, people have this idea that you can't be hard on people. I think some people need it. I needed it. I wouldn't have been as good a player if I didn't have my brother just sitting on top of me for 4 years, because even when it was going good, he would never let me get full of myself. And I needed that. I didn't need pats on the back, and I still don't. I don't take compliments very well. I think that's a self-reflection.
Me too.
I have a hard time with it. Like, even when Bobby tweeted out, like, I don't have it all figured out. And so, like, it's uncomfortable for me if someone pays me a compliment. I try to deflect. I don't know if that's right, but it's just a personality thing for me. I just try to deflect.
You know, I heard.
Well, I really like your headphones, by the way, and you sound great. You sound great right now, because is he our first guest, Bobby? That's got like his own like legit podcast set up.
I think Josh Rudd had it too, right?
And I think Rick Camp also, but You sound
Well,
great.
you
You
guys
sound
are in-
great, Ryan.
you
So
guys
where
are
the
in-
compliment? Where the
You guys
compliment?
are in this world and you understand like sound makes a huge
So big.
difference. And I do this out of respect to the other people because I want it to sound good for you guys.
I appreciate
And
it.
I understand the challenges of the editing portion of a podcast when it doesn't come back great, because you can't tell at times when you're in the moment and you're recording and then you go back and edit and listen to the playback and it's like, okay, you got some tweaking to do. And because if you're going to put something out into the world, you want it to sound great but I also listen to a lot of different podcasts and everybody there's like audio mistakes for everybody. I don't care if it's Ryan Holiday, Tim Ferriss, like the bigger ones at Joe Rogan, like any of those that you listen to, there's going to be those little audio tweaks. So I always give people a free pass on, as long as the content's good, like that's all I care about. You know, I can handle some little hiccups here and there. Anybody that listens to my show I think my intro is really stiff. And I've tried to tweak a lot of things with the intro. It's like BP now. I play the music. I don't know how you guys do the intros for the other shows, but I have the music going while I'm recording the intros. So you got to get it in one shot. And I'll have to, if I'm screwed up at the end, I'll have to go back in. But I tried it with no audio and it was worse than what it is. And I still,
What do you attribute that to? Like you just...
I'm a big music guy. I'm a big music guy. I've always listened to music. I have music going almost all hours. It probably drives my wife crazy, but I am more relaxed when I have some background noise going, and that's from a lot of trial and error with it. It just works better for me. I don't know if anybody else does it that way, but it works better for me to have the music going while I'm doing the intros and the outros.
Yeah, we just put ours in post-production, but yeah, so I wrote a book last year and I did the audiobook myself. I fully recorded and produced it. It was one of the only projects, because I do lots of stuff on the web, and it was one of the only projects that I was literally like cracking as a person. Like I was like, I'm never doing this again. I was literally falling apart because with audio, I ended up, because I sold my business last August in Bloomington, moved here. I ended up recording in 3 different places, which I knew was a no-no, but I didn't realize how much of a no-no. So like a third of the book was recorded in one place, then another. And as I would go through it, you record a chapter, you go through it, you always find some pops and clicks and some words you stumbled through. So you have to like cut them out and re-record those. So you go through and do a sentence, patch it back in. But then all the patches that I recorded were in a different place than they were originally recorded. So now I can hear a difference in my voice just because of the acoustics of the room. And I'm like, the more I edit this, the more it sounds like a quilt with holes and patches. And I'm like, it's like the more I clean it up, the worse it gets. And I was like taking 2 steps forward and 5 steps back. And it was taking so long, like 8 hours of editing per chapter. It was,
and I don't know what the terminology is for it, but there's actually, because on playback, your voice sounds different than the way you hear it when you speak. Mm-hmm. It's going to sound off. And a lot of people don't like listening to the sound of their own voice on playback, or just like actors don't like watching the movies that they film once they're done with it. So I'll go back for editing purposes, but very rarely do I then go back and actually listen to the episodes once I'm done editing them. Because again, I think you get into that, you're going to start picking yourself apart.
Yep.
And nobody else is going to hear. You're going to hear it because you're doing it, and so you know what it's supposed to sound like. But anybody listening in, they're not going to pick up a lot of that stuff that you're picking it up because you're putting it out there into the world.
They're definitely not. Because Dan's always like, your sounds wrong with your audio, and I'm like, it sounds fine to me. Like,
and post production is going to clean a lot of that stuff up too.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so I can hear I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I can hear the patches in everyone else's audiobooks now. Like I can tell when there's like a slight intonation change in their voice. I'm like, oh, because everyone, whether it's Michelle Obama, after she records it, like she's going to go home and then they're like, hey, we need you to redo these lines. And you can always tell, I can tell when they patch them in. And so when I released my audiobook, I asked like some of my family and friends who listen to it kind of in advance. I'm like, let me know if you hear any differences. And the first person to get back to me was like, well, I'm on chapter 4 and I haven't heard any yet. And I'm like, because there were like 5 in the first chapter. I'm like, it's only me. Okay. Like we're good. And then I stopped freaking out. But
I'll leave some things in here and there, especially with the intros and the outros, because I want someone that's listening in that maybe is trying to go through it for the first time to understand that there are mistakes that are made. And yeah, you want to clean some things up. But I think the human part of it too is it's okay to leave some of those cracks and tweaks in there, because I think people need to see that everybody's flawed a little bit and we all have baggage and it's not going to be perfect. So I'll leave some stuff in sometimes. Like my intro with Jeff Duncan, and Jeff and I are really good friends. I thought my intro was not good, but I left a couple things in there because it's like, okay, at the end of the day, if somebody wants to beat you up about it, that's fine. But again, I care more about the content than I do anything else.
Yeah. Bobby and I have made it 59 episodes without being canceled doing it live. So good job. Good job, Bob. We haven't been.
I like the live component.
It's scary.
But I like that part of it. My mom, nobody talks about my mom. My mom is probably the most competitive person in our family. She's a huge baseball fan, but competitive on some other avenues. She got me into theater and speech when I was growing up. She was my speech coach when I was in 7th and 8th grade. And I did not like speech. But she was ultra competitive. She made me do it because she knew we were probably going to win if I was in it. But my events, one was impromptu. So talk about you could walk into a room, talk about like being nervous. You're an 8th grader. You're in a room with people that you don't know. They're going to give you a topic, whether you know about that topic or not. You have 5 minutes to write on it, and then you got to stand up and talk about it. So I would beg her to let me out of it. But looking back now, probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, that and her forcing me to get into a show at the University of Evansville. The University of Evansville has one of the best theater departments in the country. Carrie Preston, Rami McMalley, the guy that was Freddie Mercury in Bohemian Rhapsody, he's an Evansville grad. So we had season tickets to Evansville's theater department. So I knew how good it was, and I didn't want to do it. But I got the part, and looking back now, I have friends that were in that play that I still talk to that were college kids, and I was in 8th grade. I talk about hanging out with an older peer group, besides being with your dad's players that are older. I got that side of it, but that was competing as well. Like we competed for national theater competitions. Like once you were done, if you're good enough, you're going to go get in another competition. So I got to see, and people think that theater or speech people don't compete. Like they compete in a different way, but they're competing for ribbons, they're competing for trophies. And so it brought a different type of competitive deal to me. Plus the live aspect of doing a 3-hour show where you're on stage for the entire time. There's some high wire to that part of it that I think that feeds people too. Like the people that really like it, I think that anxiety and that adrenaline, I think it drives people. Because there is that unknown, and yes, it's debilitating for some people. The people that can't handle anxiety. We have enough of it out there now. It's sad to think about social media where we're at. If you guys haven't seen Social Dilemma that just came out on Netflix, it's really good. It talks. It's with the ground floor designers of Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and the interesting thing is none of them work for those companies anymore. And you feel bad for those people because when they started to develop these apps, they thought it was going to bring the community together and it was going to be a way to bring people together. And you're seeing the opposite now. It's creating divisiveness, not just in America, but in every developed country. You're seeing the same issues going on because of social media, because the hard part is your feed is individual to yourself to keep you engaged with the app. And most people don't understand that. And if you use anything, I think you need to study up on it. It's great. Socials are great. The phone is great if you use them right, but it also can create some issues for people because they don't understand what's going on. Sorry, I got off on a huge tangent there. I have a tendency.
Someone mentioned that to me yesterday, the social dilemma.
It's phenomenal. Well, you feel bad for us as a society in general because you can see why we're at the place that we're at. And you see it on Twitter every day. You guys have been a part of it. And I appreciate the fact that you guys are very open to bringing different views together. And okay, agree to disagree sometimes. I was thinking about that in the shower today. Like when you guys had Teacher Man and Jeff on, it's a little bit like the stock market and Warren Buffett and David Portnoy. Like Warren Buffett, for me, you know, traditional investing and old school, and Portnoy now is like all in on Bitcoin.
Just a guy that's
just insane
with some money and a platform.
Yes. And is out there day trading on live day trading, which who knows if Warren Buffett probably doesn't even think about David Portnoy at all, because he doesn't need to, because he's built it up traditionally. But I think there's some, you know, parallels to the baseball community, because you have those older traditional guys that have been successful in the way that they did it. And then you have a younger generation that is going to be all about tech, that's going to be all about this, and they're successful in their own right as well. But where you see it social, and with the socials, is the comparison aspect is not fair to anybody. For me to compare myself to you or to Dan
that's the worst.
Is not fair, but people do it all the time. They make those social comparisons, and someone's path is completely different than your path. Warren Buffett's path to get to where he's at, he still lives in the same house that he bought in Omaha for $35,000.
Which is crazy.
And David Portnoy is probably spending millions of dollars every year for the lifestyle that he lives. So two completely different things, but yet why would those guys compare each other? And I think that's what you see on Twitter now. A lot of it is apples to oranges. When people start to fight with each other, a lot of it is they're arguing about completely different things. And it's just so hard for people to get on the same page, because now we're at that point where if you argue with me, we're supposed to be like mortal enemies. And that's not what it should be about. Like, okay, if we argue, we argue. We may not find a common bond, but I guarantee if you pick up the phone and call the person and get them one-on-one, it's going to be a completely different conversation. And reading text is so harsh. I'll send a text to my wife, or she'll send a text to me, and it'll come across really harsh, but that's not the context of it. And you lose context when you read. I mean, you just don't get the inflections, you don't get it. And again, if people could get on the same page, again, they're going to disagree, but it's so hard right now.
Well, if you don't speak in absolutes and you don't hammer home one side or the other, you don't have a brand at that point. It's funny you say phone calls, because the one person who calls me after like Twitter, like things on Twitter, is your brother. Once a month, I get a phone call from him, and we're on the phone for an hour, and we basically run down anything I've tweeted in the last 30 days.
He and my wife are my voice of reasons. Like my wife is not on social media at all. She just doesn't do it. And then my brother is my voice of reasons. I've taken things down because of my brother, because he'll read them and be like, hey, just take it off. Like that's not what you should be putting out there. And he hasn't done that lately. So maybe I'm being a smarter social media user. But taking this job, I think, lends itself to being in the middle more, much more than coaching. I think when you work for the ABCA, you're going to ride in the middle, because you're going to deal with, and that's not my job. My job is not to tell people what they should believe. My job is to be a resource to help players and coaches. And so, you should ride in the middle. And again, I know, speaking from experience, what worked for me as a coach. But the path that I took and what I used as a coach may not work for somebody else. And, my path, we talked about that off air. I mean, me giving plasma to stay in coaching, or sleeping in my office, or working a million part-time jobs to stay in coaching, that may not work for somebody right now. It worked for me, but that may not work for somebody else.
Yeah. I want to jump down a line that you mentioned. We're going to double back to all this stuff, but you mentioned comparison. And this is definitely a tough thing for kids, especially, who can, you can have a average size high school freshman who's 5'8", 140 pounds, jumps on Instagram, sees a kid who's 6'5", 230 pounds, throwing 96 at a PG tournament. You're like, oh, I'm terrible at baseball, I guess. So for you as a coach, this is my question to you, and as a longtime recruiter, what would you tell parents and players about developmental age versus biological age? Because I talk about this a lot. I've written about it. Where would you say that? Because I guess the questions are this: are you a better baseball player if you're just physically more developed, like you're a 17-year-old in a 15-year-old's body, and you can throw a ball harder and hit a ball harder, or you're the 15-year-old who's, the right size and whatever for his age, essentially age appropriate, but you have really good skills. I mean, how do college coaches take into account, like, this kid's just physically better built, he's farther along developmentally, this kid's maybe just not there yet, but has good baseball skills? I don't know where my question got lost.
I think you have to ask the question, like, what is the end goal? I mean, what is the end goal? I mean, you can't discount the fact that someone that is more mature than their peer group is probably going to dominate that level at that time. So really, what is the end goal? Is the end goal to play in the big leagues? Is the end goal to play Division I baseball? Is the end goal to just get on your high school team? Again, that's where everybody's path is different. I'm a great example of I didn't mature until college. I looked at Division III schools coming out of high school as well, because I didn't know I was good. Even junior year of high school was a struggle for me. God bless Coach Merkel. He stuck with me. But if you would have seen me play as a freshman in high school, I probably weighed 115 pounds. Even I was 142 pounds when I showed it up at Evansville. I was working out, but you didn't know. This time would have been bad for me as a high school player, because I would have gotten overexposed when you watched me play. But it would have been a great time from a training aspect, because of what we understand about nutrition and strength training. If you want to get Bryson DeChambeau is a good example. If you want to get bigger and stronger, you can get bigger and stronger, like, regardless. If you want to get bigger and stronger, you can do that. And you can do that in today's day and age. There's so many good training things out there. But again, I think you have to ask yourself what the end goal is. And for doing it as long as I did, and seeing as many games as I saw, and coached as many players as I did, I have so many examples of guys that were really good high school players that ended up not being good college players, and then guys that were just okay high school players that ended up being phenomenal college players and got a chance to play professional baseball. One is on the big league staff with the Indians right now, Justin Toole. Great example of was a good high school player and dominated that level, struggled as a freshman in college, and then looked himself in the mirror and dominated the college level and got an opportunity to play 6 years in minor league baseball. And I don't think anybody thought that was going to happen. Jamie Carroll, another great example of a guy who was a really good college player, but was a better pro. You just see so many examples of it. This is a hard time for college recruiters, because they're having to make, especially at the Division I level, they're having to make decisions on kids that they shouldn't be having to make decisions on. And it's just the way the system is set up until the NCAA wants to come in and make some changes, but it's still on the parents. Everybody wants to, I've texted guys about this that are getting after the Division I recruiters. It is not the Division I recruiters' responsibility to stop the recruiting process. It's the parents' responsibility. If a parent of a 15-year-old tells a college coach that their kid is not to be recruited, that college coach won't recruit the kid. And that's where the line in the sand has to be drawn, is it has to start with the parents. I have a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old. I think my 17-year-old, if he wants to, will probably be able to run track somewhere in college. He and I really haven't talked about the process at all. I've mentioned things to him and told him I will be a resource for him if he wants it, but I'm not doing it for him. I refuse, because I coached forever, and the kids whose parents did it for them, it didn't have the same impact on them in college, because they felt like they were doing it for the wrong reasons. And that's a hard thing as a parent. I'm a parent. I get how difficult it is to be a parent right now, because you want what's best for your kids. Like, everybody's heart's in the right place. The Division I recruiter, he's trying to help his program. They're trying to win games. They're trying to win a national championship. A parent of a 15-year-old wants what's best for their kid. And hopefully if they want that, that's going on to play in college. So everybody's heart is in the right place. And this is where you see the divisiveness. Everybody's heart's in the right place. It's just they have different end goals. And a parent also has to understand that if you do let your 15-year-old commit, there are no guarantees to any of this. And if you're okay with that as a parent of letting your 15-year-old commit, but understand that it may not work out at the school that they've committed to. That's what you're signing up for right now. That's where it's at. That's the honest truth. For anybody to not look at that honestly, then it's just a social media grab or an ego grab that your kid is going to this school. Like, that's an ego grab. And that's not what it should be about, regardless of what school they end up going to, or even if they play a college sport. We all played college sports. It's not an easy thing to do, especially if you're not passionate about it. If it's really not your passion of playing that sport for the right reasons, don't do it. Like, you're going to be miserable in college. Go be a regular student. Like, there's nothing wrong with being a regular college student. There's nothing wrong with that.
What percentage of kids would you say show up to college sport, whatever, and drop out within a month, just quit their sport?
Honestly, you see them ride it out because of the scholarship. I've had it. That was later in my career. I did have 2 kids that showed up that were on really good scholarships that within 2 weeks of training, and our 2-week training before team practice start was probably the hardest time for those guys, because we would do some Friday early morning stuff, and the general conditioning was difficult. You know, you have some kids that have never trained before, and this is the first initial shock of, I'm not sure what I signed up for. But every college student on every college campus is going through the same deer in headlights. The freshmen, I don't care if it's D1, D3, JUCO, even the regular students are going to have that, did I make the right decision those first 2 weeks? Because everything is brand new on campus. They don't know anybody. They may know a few people, but probably don't know anybody. So you're trying to make friends. You're going to be thrown completely out of your comfort zone. And so every person that shows up to a new place is in the same boat, but people don't understand that because they're self-centered on their own journey, which that's being a human, is you're self-centered on your own journey. So that was later on. I did have a couple guys that we got, and I tried to tell them, like, hey, hang on, because we're through the worst of it now. We're getting into the team portion of it, and this is going to end up being fun. But, you know, sometimes I think you have to make it hard in the initial, because honestly, you're not going to be able to count on those guys anyway. Like, bottom of the 9th, tying run or game-winning run at second base, they're people that opt out early, like, they're going to opt out when you need them. So, like, it's not a callous thing. It's just, it is what it is. And I think probably as a coach, you want to figure out if somebody's going to quit on you early, because then you know, rather than somebody that's just trying to hang on because they're going to ride it out because mom and dad wanted them to play, or they're on a scholarship. And I saw more of that kids would ride it out, even though you could tell they weren't passionate about it. And it was work. Like, playing a sport should not be work. Yes, there's some work components to it. Yeah. But at the end of the day, you should be excited for a 6 a.m. workout. You should be excited for
okay.
I'm just saying,
let's not get ahead of ourselves here.
The better ones do that, though. The better ones are off, like, in a good way. The higher achievers, you know, I'm sure David Portnoy is off a little bit. He's a higher achiever. You know, he started a really successful company. Steve Jobs was off. Elon Musk off. Michael Jordan off. I mean, if Last Dance showed us anything, off in a good way. You know, he was a high achiever and also a generalist. Like, people want to talk about Jordan, how good he was in baseball. Great golfer, great baseball player, great gambler. You know, Michael Jordan's good.
Great gambler is a stretch.
Well, a stretch. But
enthusiastic gambler.
Enthusiastic gambler. But, you know, again, I got off tangent there, but, you know, I think, again, you saw it more with kids that didn't know why they were playing and just were punching the clock. because they thought they were supposed to do that rather than, okay, this is what I really want to do. But the ones that get it and the ones that are passionate about it, all parts of it are great for them. And those are the special ones where that can even take something that you don't want to do. We're all out in the real world. How often do you do something every day that you probably don't want to do? Every day you're going to have to do things that you probably don't want to do, but you should find a way to jump in on it. And rather than, oh no, here we go again. I don't think it's a great personal lifestyle, statement. If you can't try to get enthused about it, I just think it's a tough way to go through life if you can't at least create some enthusiasm. And you do have to fake it sometimes. It's all part of being successful and getting out of bed. Like if you really focused on all the bad things that could happen to you or will happen to you, you won't get out of bed in the mornings. And some people don't.
I don't think that kids or even their parents realize what goes into making a certain level of player or a certain recruiting aspect. They see Twitter, they see Instagram, so-and-so committed, he's my age, and he does something that I could probably do. Like, why aren't I getting recruited? I'd like to see maybe the hard
part is you can't look 5 years down the road. And that's where you have to have that perspective as a parent is you don't know if that's the best thing for the kid who just committed to that school or committed to so-and-so. You have no idea what that journey is going to look like. So again, be careful what you wish for. My dad still says it all the time. Be careful what you wish for, because that kid that just committed to this school or this school, you may look up in 5 years from now and be like, that was the worst decision that kid made or that parent made. Like, so why do that? That's unfair. It's an unfair decision to be like, well, I should be doing this and this, and look, this person's doing this. Okay. Write that down. I mean, if you want to do a thing, write that down. And this is something as a recruiter, you would have to pay attention to that. Okay. This school's recruiting 20 guys. Okay. 3 of them graduated in that class. 6 years from now, 7 years from now, that class that he was in going to that school, only 3 of those guys graduated from that school. So again, was that a good decision? I don't know. Like, you don't know if it's a great decision. That's the high wire act, is like, you don't know if any decision you make is going to be a good decision in anything.
Yeah. Right.
So like, okay, ask me in 5 years if that was a good decision. And that's also why you shouldn't get too bogged down with decisions that you make, because if you write it down in 12 months from now, when you look at that, probably happened the way it was supposed to happen. And whether you want to call it karma or whatever, like I do think things that end up the way that they're supposed to, but it's tough because you're going to see it gets shoved in your face.
I'd like to see at the ABC, because I want to talk about ABCA a little bit. I'd like to see one of the coaches, like a Division I coach, just come up and basically talk to parents and say, look, if your son's not the best player on his team, playing a premium position, catcher, pitcher, shortstop, stop contacting Division I schools, center field. Stop contacting Division I schools until he is at least 90% of the time the best player on the field. He needs to be the best player on the field. And I only say this because I ask all of my kids at the end of the summer, what's the goal? What are we looking at? And I get the younger kids, the freshmen, sophomores, and they're like, I want to play Division I. And I'm like, okay, well, you're not on our top team for number one. So like, you're not in the top 12 players in our own program. And we don't have 12 Division I players on the top team. You're also not a starter at your high school. You also you play first base and you're 5'8", or you play right, you play second base. You're not
good recruiting, Bobby. Good recruiting, Bobby.
But I mean, honestly, like realistically,
yeah. But
like, when you Bobby, tell me,
do people want to hear that though? I mean,
people need to hear.
Honestly, I know they need to, but do people really want to hear it?
No, and they don't.
Does that kid that? And that's fine. Like if
and it's not to tell them talk down.
There's a lot of good examples. There's a lot of good examples of guys that as freshmen in high school aren't on anybody's radar, and then you look up when they're a junior in college, and pro ball gets it wrong too. I mean, how many guys are first round draft picks that weren't drafted out of high school? Now there's a lot of factors that go into that, signability. but guys fall through the cracks draft wise. You hear it every year. How did we miss on that guy? Well, you probably didn't miss on him at the time.
Right.
He just got a lot better from senior year of high school to junior year of college, which happens a lot. That guy got a lot better. I mean, a lot better.
Yeah. I'm just, in general, it's okay, you're not there yet. Here's what you need to do to be there.
Yes.
So don't come back at me in 6 months and ask me again, like, I told you where you need to be. Like,
yes.
These are kind of hard and fast rules. Like, they're going to recruit the best players on the team. You have to be one of those guys. So I was
dominate the level you're at.
Yeah, exactly.
Dominate the level you're at, and also stay in the present moment. And you deal with it a lot. People look so far down the road. My kids do it too. I try to bring them back. You're worried about playing in college, and you're a freshman in high school.
Right.
Like, worry about being a freshman in high school. Enjoy being a freshman in high school. You only
Otherwise,
get to
your whole career passes you by if you're always doing that. Like, you're always. I did that most of my career.
It makes people miserable. Well, I'm guarantee it made you miserable.
I mean, I don't think it made me miserable, but I think the first year, so the only year that I know that I was like, this was my second AllStar season after my second Tommy John surgery. I was 29. I ended up playing one more season after that, but it was just like a year where I was happy where I was living. I was living in Philadelphia. I was having the best year of my career. I'd come back from a second surgery. It was finally myself again. I had like a good roommate, good like teammates. It just like everything was together, and I just like wasn't as worried about whether I was going to make it to the major leagues. This was just like a wonderful summer, just like a peak of my baseball career. And it was just nice to bask in that. And then when you feel that for the first time, I'm like, I wish I had had more of this back when and I was never unhappy. Like, I always had purpose because I wanted to be better. So every day I was like looking to the future, which keeps you going. Right. And I was never unhappy. Like, I wasn't, but
do you feel like you finally let it go? I mean, do you feel like you finally resigned yourself to the fact that probably not going to play in the big leagues? Let's just try to enjoy where I'm at. And
not really. Cause I think I was still like, that was the best I was. And like MLB scouts were talking to me then, even at 29. It just was like, I'm just here. I don't know. Like, I'm happy pitching well today, and what'll happen happens. And just like everything around me is good. It just was like, I felt like I was here, like at some sort of destination, even though it wasn't my final destination. That was like, I wasn't actively on the train. Like, the train stopped for a minute and I could get out. That was kind of how I internalized
enjoy the scene.
So,
well, and my path was so different in a good way, because if you were at Memorial High School, you were going to buy into helping Memorial High School be good in everything, academically, socially, sport wise. So like, you were never allowed to get outside yourself or think about things other than helping Memorial High School be good in every possible thing it could be in. And then I think college was the same way. When you're playing for family members, there really wasn't a reason to look outside of where you're at that moment, because you're trying to help, the program that you grew up around win games as well. So like, I really didn't think I was ever going to get an opportunity to play professional baseball anyway. Like, I didn't. Even when things were good, I was like, I'm a runt. I can run. My throwing's terrible. I can hit a little bit, but that was back in the -5s. I think I hit 5 home runs my senior year. But like, if you weren't hitting like 30 back then, you had no power. Could barely get a ball out of the infield with a wood bat. And I think wood bat for a hitter is eye-opening. You can figure out who can hit with a wood. And again, if you can't drive the ball with a wood bat, you're not a professional baseball player. Like, and I was a role guy for the Otters. I fit that role well. I played all over the field. I didn't catch, I didn't pitch, but I played every other position, and Tag used me that way. It was great because I never knew what position I was going to play when I showed up to the ballpark. And so I could be in center, I could be in right, I could be in left, I could be short, third, second. And so that made it fun too. But yeah, I think I got to stay in the present moment most of the time, just because I think I was fairly realistic about where I was at, even though I was a good player, but I was more of a role guy on the teams that I played on.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, there's definitely something to be said for, I don't know, having dreams, but also being in the present. and just finding a balance. And like for me, I don't think I ever knew what it was like to be in the present until I kind of looked around and found that I was. And so it's just like everyone's different in the way they get there. I don't know. It's Bobby, I mean, you saw your career dwindling when we were playing together, but was there a moment where you felt like you were happiest in baseball?
I think the most fun I had playing baseball, which would probably equate to happiness, was playing in actually after we played together, where it was just playing. I was hurt, but we were just playing. We were trying to make the playoffs. We ended up getting knocked out the last day of the season, but it was like you show up, you're kind of in a race. Like independent baseball felt like the purest form of baseball. Like the last time I felt like I was playing for something was college. Like as a playing for something, when you're in pro ball, when you're drafted or playing minor league baseball, you're playing for yourself, which is hard to separate from playing when you're on a team. Like it's hard to not, like you want to win and guys are competing to win, but essentially like if you go 3 for 4, you had a great day at work. If you guys, even if you got blown out 12-2, and that doesn't resonate with people that compete that much. Like it's a different mindset when you're in affiliated minor league baseball than when you're in independent baseball. Because independent baseball is winning, college baseball is winning. Like you're out there to win. If you're not there to win, the coaches aren't there for you to advance your personal career. Obviously, that is a goal that they want to see all their players go on to play pro ball, but they're there to win. You get paid to win as a coach. You wear a school's name on the front of your shirt. Like that's the goal. And I mean, to Dan's question, it's like it felt good to play to win, like to play the game how you played on the playground. Like you're playing to beat the other team. Like the other guys you don't like, you try to beat them. Whereas minor league baseball, it's like everybody knows everybody. Affiliated ball, you play the same team. You're playing a series, and like you beat the other team, but nobody cares about the playoffs. Like you're not in a playoff race, guys.
Playoffs.
You're basically playing to be better than the guy that's the level ahead of you at your position. Like you're kind of competing with a ghost in that regard.
Bobby, did I recruit you good enough when I was at Iowa? Did I do a good enough job of recruiting you?
I guess I don't even remember my so what I remember about my high school recruiting,
there were like 4 or 5 really good shortstops in your class.
In Illinois, there were.
Kevin Hoff, there are a couple others, and I think you felt good if you got one of those guys. Now we ended up getting Hoff, he ended up being a third baseman, but at the end of the day, you probably were one of the better guys out of that group.
And I do love Jason White. Whitey's my guy.
Whitey was unbelievable. Another good example of a guy who developed in college and probably would have played in the big leagues if he wanted to keep doing it. But good example, wasn't passionate about playing professional baseball. He was in big league camp with the Orioles, and he hung it up like after spring training. Like that was it. Like 2005.
Yeah, he was a good. Like I think I was at his wedding, so I know him really well. I would say my recruiting in high school was different, and everyone asks me, like the kids that are juniors, like, what did you? I go, look, I only wanted 2 things. I'm like, I don't want to pay for school because I couldn't, and I wanted to start right away. And most college coaches will tell you that those 2 things don't exist at the Division I level.
Not going from out of state, right. That's where we ran into issues with the out of state difference. It was still reasonable to go to Iowa, but you ran into issues with the in-state, out of state, but still one of the cheaper Big Ten schools.
Yeah.
When comparatively, you look at how expensive it is to go to Big Ten schools, especially out of state. Iowa and Nebraska are the cheapest. So they do have a little bit of an advantage, and you have so many Illinois kids that are just general students that they go to Iowa. It's a big draw for an Illinois kid. So at least got us in the conversation. You think about the guys that sometimes the best recruits are the ones you don't get because either they don't pan out or they sign. You look at Casey Crosby. We were one of the last ones with him. He commits to Illinois but signs. Michael Bowden took a visit to us, ended up committing to Arizona State and was a 1st or 2nd round draft pick. Probably the couple that hurt the most, a guy like Kyle Gibson from Indiana who ends up going to Mizzou. We spent so much time with him. And then Michael Waka, he was born in Iowa City. And we just didn't do a good enough job financially, scholarship wise with them. But then you look up, like if those two guys are in your rotation, that makes a huge difference. If Kyle Gibson and Michael Luck are in your college rotation, you feel pretty good about your chances on a weekend to win games if those two guys are in your rotation.
It's got to feel good as a recruiter to see guys that you targeted, even if they don't come to the school. Like your eye for talent is like you. Okay, I had this guy. I
always tracked guys after, if it didn't work out for whatever reason. Not every kid you recruit. Again, being a college recruiter is going to thicken your skin because not every kid's going to tell you yes. If they did, you'd have 100 kids on your roster, but not every kid's going to tell you yes. But I loved tracking, or even kids that I didn't recruit very hard, to see how they turned out, because I think it gives you a better idea of where your evaluation skills are at. That, okay, he didn't come, but he ended up being a good player, or I didn't recruit him enough and he ended up being a good player. Like, again, that's where you have to self-evaluate your own process as a recruiter, is not just on your own guys, because you're going to see those are daily reminders if you did a good job recruiting or not. The guys on your roster, like, you're going to get reminded every day if you did it right and made the right choices. But the other ones are interesting, the ones that you don't get, like to track those guys. And
right.
I was lucky. I was right more than wrong. You're going to miss on kids. You miss on the X factor. That's where you're going to miss, is you're going to miss on how hard a kid is willing to work when baseball starts punching them in the face. Because everybody gets punched in the face. The scary part is you recruited kids that probably aren't going to fail a lot, and they may fail for the first time in their entire life. And how do they handle it? But it happens not just on the athletic side, it happens on the academic side. You look at the amount of suicide rates at Ivy League schools. Those are kids that fail academically for the first time in their entire life, and they don't handle it well either. So it happens in all walks of life in college. But yeah, you can always evaluate. I think you always have to evaluate your recruiting process when you're in it.
So I want to go to a line of conversation. Well, maybe not a line of conversation, but you mentioned a couple of times that about being hard on players, about how you appreciated, coaches being hard on you. One of the things I've seen on Twitter that I raise my eyebrow at are people getting real angry at the idea of punishment running. They're like, this is the worst. This is the dumbest idea. I think punishment running and just like physical punishments in general are like maybe a little overused, but I also don't think they're completely out of style. I don't think they're meaningless. I think they can have their value. And I think sometimes people are just being a little soft about it. But what is your take on punishment running? Does it have its place? Is it overused? Is it not used enough? What do you think?
I think as a coach, or, this is where you have to get on page with your strength trainer and your athletic trainer. I come at it more from an overtraining standpoint now. I think you have to find ways to keep people accountable. However you want to do that, there needs to be accountability. And you're dealing, especially at the college level, you're dealing with 18 to 23-year-old kids that by brain development are going to make stupid mistakes sometimes. Just like they're not developed. The prefrontal cortex still isn't all the way developed yet. They're by nature and by brain development are going to make stupid choices sometimes. So there has to be some accountability, because if not, then the inmates are running the asylum, and that's where you lose teams. So I still think there's value to accountability. Like, however you want to keep people accountable, then keep them accountable. But I think from a training standpoint, you have to see where you're at during the year to understand that, okay, is a punishment run going to get us what we need to get out of it from a training standpoint? I think if you're in a calendar cycle part of the year where you can train hard, then I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But you have to explain why you're doing it. Why is there accountability? I started to turn some things at the end with our guys. I think as you get older, you get a different perspective. And so, we would ask the guys, like, hey, if a guy's late, what's the punishment? I think that's where you can turn it around with this generation of kids, is allow them to make it theirs. Like, okay, that's fine. We may have somebody late. What do you all feel like is the correct punishment for that? If we have a guy that forgets his jersey, what's the correct what's the accountability factor? And so you put it on them. So then when it does happen, hey, this is what you guys decided.
Yeah.
Like, this is your program just as much as my program. This is what everybody came to a decision on, that this was going to be the best thing for the program from an accountability standpoint. And then it has value to your team. And it's not just, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do a punishment run because I said it. We're going to do a punishment run because that's what everybody decided was the proper accountability for this decision. So I think that's a way it still has value. I think anything has value as long as you put a why to why you're doing it. Tiger Woods is still working out until he pukes. Like, is that a good thing? It works for him. I mean, you can say whatever you want, but I don't think you can discount the fact that it still works for an individual or still works in a team setting. Again, that's what Bobby talked about. You can't speak in absolutes.
Yeah.
Like, there's no black or white with any of those decisions. Like, you can't speak in absolutes with any of it. It's all gray area, because the person that says you should never do punishment runs, I guarantee there's a program out there right now that does punishment runs that probably won the national championship. Or again, you can look at examples from either side of an argument, and you can get confirmation bias on anything that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, the Tiger Woods thing you mentioned. I don't know if you jumped in my Twitter argument about. I think you did. Right?
Sorry, and that was Dr. Rose. Dr. Rose, I apologize. That went in like in a direction, but I also did apologize to him. Like, I love their stuff at On Base U, but
it's my TPI. I think he does.
Yeah,
right?
that's the On Base U and my TPI are the same. My TPI is the golf portion of it, and then On Base U is the baseball portion of it. But I was with you on that. Like, I don't think you can discount that. Okay, if Tiger wants to work out till he pukes, let the guy work out till he pukes. Like, he felt like if that's going to help him win a major championship, whether you agree with it or not, if Tiger Woods feels like that's going to help him win his next major tournament, by all means, work out till you puke into a bucket. Mm-hmm. Like, go do it.
And that's like the experience factor, right? You take in the experience factor of baseball. Twitter's big in this. Like, Albert Pujols tells you to swing down, and then you got the other guys are like, well, that's not really what he's doing. It's like, okay, but Albert Pujols is better than you at baseball. So if he's saying this is what he does and this is how he thinks, you need to put some stock into that, whether you agree with it or not. If Albert Pujols told you to ride a unicycle 3 miles a day because it's going to help your balance, like, you at least need to entertain that might benefit somebody somewhere.
And this is where you're going from average performance to peak performance. To get your performance from an average area to a peak area, you're going to have to do something outside that is abnormal. And so, yes, the general population is going to look at that and be like, well, that's not right. Well, if it were, you see it with doctors, you see it with musicians, you see it with athletes. The best at their craft do things that are off. Like, that's how they get to that level, because they're doing things that not everybody does. Yes, they have some God-given ability and they have talent, but to take that talent to an area that nobody hardly gets to, which is the elite level, you have to do things differently, because if not, you're going to be like everybody else. That's just, again,
definitely.
And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with being average and being like everybody else. It's hard to be elite, but to get that to an elite level, you're going to have to do some things that not everybody is doing. I mean, look at Trevor Bauer. You know, I think Trevor Bauer is
a touchy
sore spot.
I'm sorry, but Trevor Bauer is a guy that couldn't have been a multi-sport athlete. You know, and yes, we all love multi-sport athletes, but Trevor Bauer is a guy that would not be pitching to the level that he is if he was a multi-sport athlete. He got really good at throwing a baseball, and he understands the tech side, you know, a little bit like Bryson DeChambeau now on the tech side of things. DeChambeau, same thing. If he didn't do what he did along the way, and
do you want to explain real quick who he is? I just came into awareness of who he is, but do you want to?
He's a golfer, and guys don't like him. He's a little bit like Trevor Bauer. He's going to say things that come to his mind, and that's going to ruffle some feathers, and that's okay. Like, it works for both those guys. They're going to ruffle some feathers, but he doesn't win. Bryson DeChambeau doesn't win that championship last week if he's not a freak in what he does. He put 40 pounds of muscle on. He gets readings on every golf swing. All of his irons are the same length and same weight, so he can take the same swing every time, which for me is a great idea. I didn't even know that was an option, to get golf clubs that are the same size and the same weight. So he takes his same swing. The book that he read talks about a one plane swing. He tries to take the same swing every time, which should be right. That's the right thought process, right? For him. Try to take the same swing every time, regardless of where you're at on the golf course, and just let your clubs play the different lengths. Like, for me, it's fascinating. Yeah.
My buddy was telling me about him last week, and I was like, that all makes a good amount of sense, because we were talking about arm actions. Cause I actually was in like a Twitter argument with Lucas Giolito's dad after we talked about this on our show. He was mostly politely coming at me about saying that, like, look, I think these short arm actions, like these very short arm actions, of which Giolito, Bauer, some of these other guys, I think it's too early to judge whether that's a good thing long term. We don't have the data. We don't know.
From Tennessee, the lefty from Tennessee, very short arm action.
Yeah, we just don't know. Like, if guys start changing to that, like they've always thrown like a little longer, and they start to really shorten up, we might have a pile of arms that are blown out in 5 years, or we might not. We don't know.
Or the yips.
My only point was, like, if this weird way of throwing was natural, we would have done it by now. Like, there'd have been more guys over the years who've just naturally figured out, like, hey, this is a great way to throw, but we haven't. We've essentially just coached ourselves into that today. That was my only point.
Yep.
So we went back and forth. He was mostly polite, but was like just kind of irritated at me. But again, my
dads are supposed to do that, right? Like, dads are supposed to stick up for their kids.
And
probably.
Dan sets off a few people.
Well, I mean, probably not the place to do it. Not a big leaguer, but I get it. But like, but sometimes a parent, I think, again, I have kids.
Yeah.
I probably look at my kids as older than my wife does. My wife, I think, will always see my children as 5 and 6 and 7 years old. Like, I don't. Like, I view them, I'd probably much harder on them than, at times. She has her own things that she's tough on. I probably view them as 15 and 17, and I don't think she ever, and she's not supposed to. I don't think moms are supposed to ever look at their kids as being older than 5 or 6 or 7 years.
I know Jim Brownlee is watching on Periscope. I'd like to know how he viewed you and your brother. He probably, when you were 5 and 6, he probably looked at you guys as 30-year-olds.
He's got good he's got good stories. Tim and I are different, even though we have similar baseball paths, way different personalities and way different, probably from an accountability standpoint with raising us. I was going to push all kinds of boundaries, and Tim didn't. And, I probably was a handful for my mom and dad at times because I was going to push boundaries, but that also helped me later on in life to be an individual and not conform. Because again, conformity for me, I would have never played out of past high school if I conformed to what everybody else was doing.
Yeah. Well, back to the story with Giolito and how it tied to Chambeau is that, so I think I was pretty clear. Like, I am not criticizing what Giolito is doing. He's a pro athlete, just like with Tiger Woods. If he thinks this is the thing to do, by all means do it. I was just saying, like, for all the impressionable kids and parents who are watching this and they're like, should I be reteaching my kid the way to throw? I'm saying let's wait. Like, we don't really know yet. It works for him. He should do it. If that's what, like, he's a pro athlete. For everyone else, I think the verdict is out. That was my main point. I'm like,
and you hit the nail on the head. Like, okay, somebody who's 25 or 26 or 27 years old,
they can make choices for themselves.
For sure.
Absolutely.
But let an 8-year-old be as athletic and let them do it natural. I think I'm on the same page with that. Like,
And I do agree on shortening arm actions
stuff. And I thought I liked it because he was bringing light to the core velocity belt, which I think the core velocity belt for pitching and for hitting is one of the best training devices that are out there. I think it allows people to feel what they're doing through their movements. It allows them to feel their stronger position. So I'm a big fan of the core velocity belt. So I like the fact that he was bringing light to that. And I don't know if he was consciously making that change to his arm action as much. He made some changes to his lower half, which led to some upper body changes. Because again, I think we've all been through it. The more you start thinking about the throwing motion, you're going to run into some issues with the throwing motion the more you think about it.
Well, if his dad's listening, I just want to say something like, don't screw him up. We're in the playoffs. White Sox in the playoffs. Don't screw this guy up. Like, we need him. We, as a yes. White Sox fan.
As Tim Brownlee would say, like, hey, where are you at in the front office? Like, it drives him crazy when people say we, start to take we. He's like, are they in the dugout? Like, they're saying we, like, are they making decisions?
I've suffered as much as all these guys listening to Cubs fans.
You and Chris Malzewski.
Just for years listening to Cubs fans. Now it's the White Sox. Don't screw this up, Lucas. You throw however you feel like you need to throw.
But
he's earned that.
Yeah, but with the DeChambeau, the golfer guy, he like, there was never an anatomical way to swing a golf club. There was never like humans have been throwing things for a long time, and that was part of my point. Like, pitching mechanics are an extension of the way humans have thrown rocks and thrown all sorts of stuff. But golf, as I was talking about this with my buddy, he was telling me about this golfer. It's like the way we just decide to do stuff is just historical, the same as the way baseball has done a lot of stupid stuff. Like, why are all the golf clubs shorter or different lengths? No one knows. Like, why do you have to do it this way? No one knows. Just traditional. Whereas it seems to make a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense to me to what this guy's doing. Like, he's taking different. Like, why not make every club the same length? I don't see any good reason not to.
They're all the same weight. Too.
I don't see any reason not to. Like,
well, it'd be like. Yeah. It'd be like a hitter. Okay, one at bat, you're going to go up with a 34-31, and then next at bat, you're going to go up with a 30-28, which is good for training. Like, we can get into the overload, underload aspect of training, but not in a competitive environment. Like, a hitter would never do that, go up different at bats, or you're not asking a pitcher to throw. Yes, training different weights, but it'd be like asking a pitcher in a competitive environment to throw a 5-ounce ball and then an 8-ounce ball and then a 2-ounce ball. Like, you're not going to do that. So,
yeah. So I got a good question here on YouTube for you. So one of, I know this fella, Connor, what's up, man? He says he's a travel coach and a college coach has been asking him about a specific player. Should he tell the player this coach is coming to watch him, or not tell him, so that he's not like extra nervous and can kind of like play relaxed? What is the coach's role there when they start to get college recruiters asking about players?
As a coach, you need to know your athlete there. Can they handle it? I think with anything with coaching, you give your players as much as they can handle. What age group? I mean, the age range for me, I think, is important on that.
15, 16.
15. From a college recruiter standpoint, I didn't want kids to know I was showing up. I wanted to see them in their natural environment. I didn't want them to know I was there. Maybe I'm different on that, where you can see how they handle when the lights are on. I didn't want any outside influence on how they were going to show up at the ballpark that day. I wanted to see them in their natural environment without external factors, because I think you're going to see their true self then. Again, and that travel coach, like, what's the end goal for that kid? Does he want to play in college? Well, it's not your choice which college is going to be best for them. It's going to be the kid's choice and the college that recruit them. So again, I think if you say, hey, so-and-so is coming to watch you play that day, then you have to have a different conversation with the kid. Like, okay, so-and-so is coming to watch you today. Don't change a thing. And I would use that with our college guys. I think it's the same thing for college guys. Why tell them that pro scouts are showing up? I mean, it's the same thing. Yeah. I wasn't going to sit there and tell one of my players that, hey, Todd Coryell from the Giants is coming to watch you today, or Andy Stack from the Reds is coming to watch you today. Why? Because again, if every scout's going to like somebody different, if you get 10 scouts or 10 recruiters in a room, and this is what parents and coaches need to understand at the youth level and travel level. If you get 10 coaches or 10 scouts in a room and line up 10 players, they're all going to like them different in different ways. Everybody's eyes see things different. Some programs recruit differently. Some organizations recruit differently. So again, why does it matter who's showing up and who's not showing up? Because at the end of the day, they're going to make their own decisions whether they like the kid or not.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can tell them, but you also have to know your kid also. Like, can the kid handle it? Why put any undue pressure? And why would you want him acting different? Just because shouldn't he be trying to do his best and be at his best every day, regardless of who's in the ballpark?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the good ones figure out. The ones that play on TV every day figure out that it doesn't matter who's behind the screen watching them. And so it's what's going on with them individually.
And so so say he just keeps it to himself, coach shows up, watches the kid play. After that, does he tell him like, hey, you've had some scouts, talking to me about you. One of them was there. I mean, does he need to disclose it, or is I
think the time you disclose it is when that coach wants contact to be made with the kid. Okay. Not going to watch. But once that recruiter says, hey, can I get hit? Hey, have him call me. Mm-hmm. Then I think that's where the conversation needs to be had, because now you have to ask, hey, do you want the recruiting process to start? And that's where you have to get the parents involved. If I'm coaching a 15-year-old kid and that coach talks to me like, hey, can I get so-and-so to call me? That's where the travel coach has to be like, hey, I've got to talk to his parents first. Mm-hmm. And I need to ask them if they want the recruiting process to start or not. And that's where you can be the bridge until there's contact trying to be made on the college's side. I don't even think it's a bridge you even need to cross, because then people are just going to be disappointed, because then it's like, hey, so-and-so from so-and-so school showed up and they haven't reached out to me, or they haven't asked about me, what's going on? And then you're creating, again, those social comparisons that don't need to be there, because you're giving information that doesn't even need to be talked about until somebody actually wants to actively recruit somebody.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay. No, I think that's really helpful, because I think that I wonder if I even knew the right answer to that back in the day. Because you start to get contact from coaches and you're like, should I tell the kid? Because it's exciting for him. It's like, hey, this is like really positive. A coach is asking about you, but yeah, you got to figure out whether it's in the best interest of them. So,
well, on the college side too, I'd have guys, hey, coach, what do you think about my prospects of being drafted in this draft? I'd be like, hey, has anybody sent you any cards? Because they usually come to my office, and not one organization has sent you a card. And again, that's not to be mean. That's to be honest. That's real. Mm-hmm. Hey, it's
Bobby Stevens talk.
Don't get your heart broken about the draft. You haven't filled out one card, and not one scout has tried to interview or contact you. So let's pump the brakes here on pro ball. And again, let's try to dominate the level we're at. If you're good enough, somebody's probably going to give you a chance. But why, if nobody's even contacting you, you're just putting yourself in a terrible headspace, because now you're focusing on things that are out of your control. You can't control if someone drafts you. You can't control if someone recruits you. That's out of your control. So why are you even concerned with it?
Yeah. I have a question for you, Bobby.
Did you like that, Bobby?
I love that.
We have a hard time with being honest now. And again, this is where the mortal enemy things come into play. Like, you have to choose side. Well, that's not just because someone is being honest and truthful with you doesn't mean they don't like you. It actually means they probably love you deep down inside. If someone's being honest and truthful with you, they love you way more than somebody that's going to tell you what you want to hear. Way more. Right. It's a lot harder. And yes, people get bunched up about it. But again, I think you have to appreciate, you don't need it coming from every direction, but you need a couple people that are going to be brutally honest with you. And yeah, it may hurt your feelings, but it's probably coming from a really genuine place that person loves you a lot and wants to see what's best for you.
So now that you've left college baseball, you're no longer a coach, you can answer one of my big questions objectively. How do you feel about calling pitches for players?
I was going to bring this up. I put it in my notes. Again, it's all gray area.
Which I mostly agree with, which I do mostly
and
agree
again,
with.
I saw the initial tweet and then I didn't deep dive in. What age range of kids are we talking about? Because I'll walk through it. I was lucky. I caught.
Take me through all of them. Yeah,
I caught in Little League, and probably because that was the one position that I would actually receive. Okay, I couldn't throw like John McCauley, who's passed away now, coached for my dad a little bit, and he was okay with me skipping throws to second base. He goes, "Hey, just get rid of it as quick as you can and one hop it." So I got good at one hopping. I was just lucky that we had a Division I shortstop that was 9 years old. Robbie Kent ended up playing at Notre Dame and Arizona State that could catch the ball. Like, I don't think you can do this with every Little League team because the catcher may one hop it and your shortstop or second baseman may not be able to catch it. But for me, it was perfect because I could get rid of it quick. And so I would throw guys out. But I did get to call pitches sometimes. And then wasn't good enough to catch in high school, which was lucky for me that I switched positions. But Coach Merkel called every pitch at Memorial High School. And again, you can't discount the fact that we only lost 5 games in 4 years. So like that worked for him. College, my dad would call pitches a little bit here and there, but catchers would run it. I let guys at Western, if they could handle it, would run it. And then if it got tight, would start to call pitches. And the thought process on this with the 18 to 23-year-olds now, and some coaches will tell you, hey, they got to go to class. So it's not their responsibility to deep dive into the scouting report on the teams that we're playing, because that's my job as a coach to call the pitches, because I'm going to be the one doing all the research, watching all the synergy. So I'm going to have a way better understanding of how to get guys out, much more than he is. But I felt from a flow standpoint for pitchers and catchers, way better to let them run it. And then if you had to call pitches in tight situations, because what I didn't want was for the catcher, if we got beat, to go back to his dorm room or his apartment and just completely beat himself up all night because he made wrong pitch calls. And that was the thought process for me, is that I needed to, at times, I think the coach has to take responsibility for that part of it, to take ownership and take it off their players, because you could see it with guys. It could negatively affect their performance through pitch calling, and then would carry over into offensively for them because they couldn't get out of their own way and they were beating themselves up about making bad pitch calls. So again, I think there's all gray area with that. Yes, I think in a perfect world, the catcher and pitcher should run every pitch of every game, because I think the flow is better. I think you throw more strikes. I think you play better defense with it. But it's not realistic to think that 18 to 23-year-olds can handle every pitch of every game. I think they need a break sometimes. Now, there's nothing wrong with letting them run it. And if they make some mistakes of talking it in between innings, I guess I was all over the map with how to do things. Like, there was no black and white. So yeah, sometimes we would run the game. Sometimes the catcher would run the game. Sometimes it was a mix. I think it depends on your personnel and how much they can handle. And again, it's about winning games. So if this is going to help you win games, if the catcher calling his own game and the pitcher chiming in when need to is going to help you win at the college and pro level, then let them do it. If it's not going to help you win games, then you have to make an adjustment.
So I guess I'd like to go back to two points you made. So first one, I've heard that argument about synergy, about like kids have to go to class all day. They don't have time to deep dive. A, does it really take that much deep diving to get a scouting report on a D1 hitter? And B, why can't the coach do his deep dive? It's always going to come down to a couple actionable things. Like, hey, guy kind of long swing, beat him with breaking balls down. Why can't the coach deep dive during the day? Say, okay, here's the summary of what we need to tell our catchers. Hey, 20-minute meeting. Here's kind of what we think, and let's go through it. I mean, as a reliever,
okay, let me ask you this from just a simplicity standpoint. I think as you're breaking down another team and how to get their hitters out, you're going to look at if they swing at the first pitch, right?
Ambushers.
Okay, who are the guys in the lineup that are going to ambush the first pitch? So that's the first place you need to look. How many times does that cat swing first pitch? You know, if it's 90%, then if we get into a big situation, we're going to have to probably throw off speed first pitch. Now, what do they like in their hitters counts? That's the next place you go to. Again, if the pitcher can execute, fine. If not, then we're going to the pitcher's strengths. Mm-hmm. And then how are you going to finish with 2 strikes? Because there's a variety of ways you're going to do that. Are you going to spin in the dirt? Are you going to go hard in? You know, I think those are the 3 main areas. And so I agree with you a little bit on there. Like if you stick to those 3 components, like do they swing first pitch? How are we going to pitch them in big situations? And then how are we going to pitch them with 2 strikes? Mm-hmm. And then cross counts. I mean, the 1-1s, I think we all agree that the 1-1 count is the most important. And which is why the changeup for me, and I think my dad will agree, I think the 1-1 changeup is the great equalizer, especially when you're dealing with ultra elite bat speed, which at the college level, you're going to run into elite bat speed. And at the pro level, you're going to run into elite bat speed. The high school, which is why most high school guys don't throw changeups, is they're a better high school pitcher who's going to go pitch in college. His changeup is in the hitter's bat speed. So, which is why they're not going to throw it, but it's the great equalizer at the college and pro level. So the 1-1 changeup, if you can get it in for a strike or anything off speed, get it in for a strike. I think that's the great equalizer. And that's where you're going to see elite pitchers at the college and pro level is they can throw something different than when they need to. In tight situations, they can throw something else besides a fastball. Mm-hmm. And you see at the pro level, there's guys throwing 97, 98, getting hit around the ballpark because their command is not good and they can't mix anything else in. And hitters, Bobby was a hitter, I was a hitter. Hitters are not smart. If you give them multiple things to think about, you've got a chance as a pitcher. You have a chance. So well, I mean, you can simplify the scouting report for guys.
Everybody at that level can usually time a bullet.
Yes. They wouldn't be there if they couldn't. They wouldn't be there. They get weeded out in the interview process. If you don't have good bat speed, probably not getting an interview to an upper level college or a professional team. You're not getting there. Like that's bare bottom floor of entry is bat speed.
Check a few boxes. You got to check a few athletic boxes before they start getting between the ears.
Yes. Point of entry is going to be bat speed because I don't care if you're a new scout or an old scout, you can show up at the ballpark and see if a guy can swing fast or not.
Yeah. You
can see if a guy can run fast. The eye gauge on the mound takes a little bit of time, but if you've been doing it long enough, you need all the metrics and you need to write all this stuff down. But the guys that have been scouting forever and recruiting forever, they've forgotten more than most people know. And that's why they've seen so much. Like people can make fun of those guys all they want because they're older, but they have value in the game because the amount of games and reps they've seen. And they've seen that, you know what, I saw Reggie Jackson hit. This dude reminds me of Reggie Jackson. You can't discount the fact that that's right for that scout. Or this college recruiter, you know, Eric Snyder's one of my favorites. Been doing it a long time. Eric Snyder can walk in the ballpark and figure out that, okay, that dude can play because of the amount of games that he's seen. And you can't discount the experience factor when it comes from scouting and recruiting. You can't. Like, I know the metrics and all that stuff that's new is important. You can't discount somebody's watched 10,000 baseball games and watched 1 million players. Like they're going to recognize things more than somebody else does.
Mm-hmm. And then, so my second thing is you discussed how like your high school was a super duper winning program. And so pitch calling worked for him. But the question is, how do we know that? I mean, like what percentage would you even say that is as a factor for a good high school program? Like they're probably dominant for a laundry list of reasons, and pitch calling is what the booger on the face of the.
Like, would you guys have only lost 4 games if catcher?
And I have the pictures over my shoulder. I have 2 framed pictures. One is me and Peter Gammons in the Cape League because Brian Bridges, who was the scouting director of the Braves, knew him. He was our pitching coach at the time. So I have a signed picture with Peter Gammons, and then the state championship team. But that team was good because we had a guy named John Ambrose who would have pitched in the big leagues if he wasn't afraid of flying, but he was low to mid 90s as a high school kid. And we won a lot of games because he was our best pitcher, but also our best position player. He played third base. And then we had a third baseman, John Sartori, that was a touch and feel throwback, would like triple pump that we'd throw after John threw. So like they were a good combo. But yeah, I agree with that part. Coach Merkel probably could have let his son Sean run the game, and we probably still would have won as many games as we did.
Mm-hmm.
What's first, that chicken or the egg? So
right.
Yeah, and like especially with high schoolers, you start talking about where do you even get this guy on your report? Is coach just calling the pitches? I mean, he's seen this Johnny new freshman for the first time, just the same as everyone else. Like, what's the difference when your team's going to just slug it out and play great D and throw a lot of strikes? It's like pitch calling. I would love if that's my thing with pitch calling is there's so many uncertainties. Like you try to choose the right pitch, but it's also like there's no objectively correct pitch. Then you try to execute the pitch. Then you try to wonder what like the hitter's even like guessing. Like you have no idea. There's so many improbables. Yeah. And so then you're like, well, if we just had a robot or we just did it out of a bingo machine, is it significantly better than not doing it that way? Probably. But like how much even? Like, is it like, it'd be fascinating to have some sort of way to figure this out.
We tracked runs per game. We ended up tracking it. So like that's what we went on. We would experiment with it. Okay, let's let him run it for a while. Let's let somebody else run it for a while. So we would experiment a little bit with total runs scored over an extended period of time, see what the difference was. And I know speed of the game is a factor now, like length of game. Obviously, it's going to take a lot longer if somebody else is calling pitches rather than the catcher and pitcher running it. But yeah, that was the one thing we did track was like total runs scored, just to get a gauge.
And what'd you find?
It depended. There was a lot of variables with it. But
everything depends.
It depends.
The Ryan
it does.
Brownlee story.
It depends on the catcher. For me, it's the catcher. That all hinges. If you feel comfortable with your catcher to be able to do it, let him do it. If you don't feel comfortable with your catcher doing it and you don't trust them, then you've got to take it over. Like you've got to trust your catcher to be able to do it.
I think when you're watching, like I played shortstop, so like I see every pitch call, and like when you think like this is a bad pitch call, like why are we calling it? Why would it even cross your mind to call that pitch right now? And you don't think that very often, but when you see it, for the most part, I see the sign. It's what I would have expected to be called 99% of the time, whether the coach is calling or the catcher's calling. But there always are like probably a handful of pitches a game, 2, 3, 4 pitches where I'm like, let's shake. Don't throw that.
And
I don't know, I'm not a catcher.
0-2. 0-2 for me was the one that used to drive me crazy. Like you have a pitcher that wastes a fastball nowhere near the zone because they're told to do that. So a hitter's never going to swing at that pitch. And now what usually happen is the next pitch is not in the zone either because a pitcher has tried to vary too much. We ended up just trying to make it good enough to hit, but we wanted guys to try to finish guys off 0-2, not waste a pitch. Now, I think in a big situation, you may have to use 0-2 as a setup. And so how are you going to do that with, different hitters in the lineup? How are you going to set them up 0-2? If we have a runner at third base, like if necessary, if we have second and third or bases loaded where we have to pitch to a guy, how are you going to pitch them in big situations where you can't work around them? But for me, I just think guys overthink 0-2 and then it's ball 2, then it's ball 3, then we walk the guy rather than, okay, let's get extremely competitive 0-2 here and let's try to finish somebody off because it keeps the pitcher in an aggressive mentality then too.
Yeah.
And Dan, that how many times you get away with an 0-2 pitch because you threw it aggressively and maybe made a mistake, but because you threw the pitch aggressively and with intent, it worked out.
Yeah, and I think 0-2 is one of those counts where you start thinking outside of the at-bat. So one of the things I learned in my second half of my pro career was just how intently I had to watch and like read all the information, like the way he swung, where the pitch was. Like every pitch is like, okay, I got this amount of information, just like playing poker. Then you make the next pitch. Okay, I got this amount of information. Then when you get to 0-2, you're like, all right, let's strike this dude out. And it's like you throw your pages away and you're like, I'm going to throw my best pitch. And you're like, wait, that's not the right pitch. Like you still need to continue to follow. Like don't throw your notes away. I feel like that happens a lot of times. And it happens with youth kids all the time where they're like, they throw 2 fastballs by a kid. And then what do? They go to their curveball because they're like, it's strikeout time. It's like, no, throw a third fastball. Throw a third fastball.
They're not good enough to adjust. We would talk to pitchers and catchers all the time about that. Like even the better college guys probably can't make a mid-at-bat adjustment. Mm-hmm. They might be able to make an at-bat to an at-bat adjustment, but a mid-at-bat adjustment, like keep sticking it to them there. Well, Dan, how many times did you throw a really good breaking ball and then it's like, okay, I'm going to throw this next one way better, and then it's spiked or you hang it because you try to do too much with it? It happens all the time with pitchers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you get to that moment where you're excited and something's going to happen, and you try harder. And that was the big thing my college coach always said, because boy, you can't try harder in this game.
It's not a try hard game.
It's literally game, right? It's an inverse relationship. The harder you try, the more you suck, and the more the baseball gods just like punch you.
And I do love the fact that you brought baseball gods to the forefront with the other. I love the name of that. I do, because I'm a believer in karma and that stuff too. I do think the game knows, and I think the game, historically and has taken care of people that do things the right way. And so I do think there is some karma and some baseball gods in our world. I think it takes care of it.
Well, yeah, and I agree, and I think it's also just the way you. I think it's the way you interpret good and bad luck. I mean, just like anything, like we all know people who've had like the worst stuff happen to them, but they still have like a positive outlook. Like, yeah, this horrible thing happened to me personally, but good things came of it. Whereas just another person could be like, yeah, I just had like a really rough bunch of years. It just depends on the sunny side. And obviously and that's my frustration with parents and players with all the bad luck and with umpires. And it's like, parents, you should want your kids to get screwed over by umpires in games, because it sets them up for all the other times in life. Like if they learn to handle umpires well, like you're just going to get rung up sometimes. It's not going to be fair. That's setting themselves up to handle all of life's bumps and bruises along the way. Like these are the times where you should not be howling at the umpires to give your kid what they deserve. Just like life is always going to be unfair. And that's what baseball teaches you, and it's funny that my coach in summer ball, he was the one that like brought the baseball gods up for the first time. I never heard it before when I was like 20, but like we were always a hard-nosed team. And he's like, there you go. Like you play the game the right way, the blooper, the bad hop, like the baseball gods take care of you. But at the same time, if you're really paying attention, you got a lot of bad hops that hurt you too. You're like, where are the baseball gods then? But you just like highlight the good stuff. And, but yeah, I mean, you just see the players' trajectory over time when they do things the right way and they treat their teammates well. I mean, just like Andy McCulley, who was my manager at Evansville, if I hadn't like played hard for him and just been a good player underneath him, he would never have stuck his neck out for me and extended my career, because I absolutely needed him to make calls for me when I came back from my second surgery. And that was just like, if I hadn't done things earlier, my career for sure ends after that second surgery, because no one would have signed me. And he just like kept calling. I was going to go to Gary and play for Taggart. That was my next stop until I got a call. So,
Jeff Duncan talked about that. He was like, you need a sponsor. When you get in organized baseball, you need a sponsor. Mm-hmm. You need someone to sponsor you. Jamie Carroll, same thing. Sal Fasano, guys that maybe shouldn't have made it. Like they had somebody pulling for them behind the scenes because they handled things the right way. And if you're not doing things right, I don't think you shouldn't expect people to try to help. Now that the world doesn't owe you anything and life doesn't owe you anything. Mm-hmm. So like, I don't think you should expect someone to help, but people are going to be more willing to help you if you are doing things the right way and you're helping other people. Like it does come back to you. But if you're not, then like you shouldn't expect somebody to help you out. It's like being a bad teammate. And that's the other thing you try to tell guys in those rooms, like look around, like you're not going to have a real long list of people that you can put on a reference. I'm probably going to be one of them, but these are the other guys around you that are going to help you get jobs, because you're not going to know anybody. So if you don't handle it right, when you try to ask somebody for something, once you leave the baseball arena, good luck getting them to even call you back, because you didn't handle it right and you were a bad teammate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even with the college recruiting stuff, I mean, like and Bobby, I'm sure that you're the same way. There's people who it's like, I'll call everyone and I'll just like, please give this kid a chance. Like, you won't regret it. You just absolutely won't regret it. Great family, parents get it. The kid's awesome. You'd love to have 30 of this kid on your team. And that's, they don't ever ask for that. They just like, that's the kind of kid they are. And as a coach, you do everything you can for them. And
yeah, you want to help those that deserve to be helped.
And that's why parents just need to know, like in the stands, like just sit there, be really positive, let the umpires just leave them alone, let the coaches leave them alone, just like be a really good positive influence in the bleachers. And that's the best thing you can do as a parent. Just like stay out of it and just be really positive.
Yep.
And then
it's hard though. It's hard from a parenting standpoint because you want what's best for your kids. And so it's tough. You don't want to see your kids struggle, but at the end of the day, you need to let them struggle. Not every day, but they need to taste that because they're going to taste it at some point. They're going to taste the struggle at some point. I would much rather my kids have to taste it early. And we talk, my daughter hates it, Nora. I talk about grit because she's working through things right now and she has some success. And I'm like, yeah, you're building your grit muscle. Like you're figuring out that it wasn't as bad as you thought it was going to be. And you actually accomplished something. So now the next time you have to make those decisions, it makes it easier because if you never get tested like that at an early age, then you're going to back off. If you've never had to really test and get over that, when you turn 18, 19 or 20, much easier to just back off because you've never had to deal with it at an early age.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the ABCA because obviously you're a big part of getting that huge event together. So obviously with coronavirus, things are different this year. So can you take us through it a little bit?
Yeah, and this was a really hard decision for us. You talk to anybody in the baseball world, they would have been to the convention probably at least once. And everybody knows how much fun it is. And it does get people's batteries recharged for the following spring and the upcoming season. And, you get so much good information. Plus you see people that you haven't seen forever. And so we did try to hold as long as we could. But when the Gaylord tells you that you can only have 750 people show up, and we had 700 guests last year, is it fair to the vendors that you can only have 100 in the exhibit hall at a time? Like, it's not fair to, so who do you tell not to show up? And then from the exhibitor standpoint, like, hey, sorry, I know you're going to pay 50 or 60 grand to get all your people there. And there's going to be 100 people at a time in the exhibit hall. Like, it just wasn't fair. So
yeah,
once we made that decision, and we were kind of working on the back, behind the scenes, it's not like, with all of this stuff, you have to figure out what platform is going to be best. We're not slapping a couple Zoom chats together. Like, that's not what we're doing. So it's going to be expensive to run this thing. And you want it right. You want it right for the speakers. You want it right for the attendees. You want it right for the exhibitors. It's a wonderful opportunity because we're all going to be going through this for the first time, and it's going to be good. Like, we're going to have, from the speaker standpoint, we always have a great lineup. We're going to have another great lineup. We still have the main stage. We still have the youth. We still have the expo theater. I do feel like it's going to be more access to the attendees than there's ever been because of the Q&As and then the side rooms after the Q&A. So if you're somebody that's coming to the virtual convention, you're going to have more access to the speakers than probably what you have had in the past. And then we picked the one that was going to be most user-friendly for the attendees and then for the exhibitors. So that's how we came to the decision on it. But I'm excited. I'm learning something new. You go through the on-site one first time and you feel like you have that under control. And now it's like, okay, you know how to do that. Like, turn around and try to run a virtual one now. And I'm lucky, like, I'm a small part of this thing. Craig Heilett's our executive director. His dad was the executive director before, and he's been here 7 years. John Litchfield has been here 7 years. John is like our chief of staff. Like, he runs everything. Juan Clark, who runs the exhibit's been with us for 19 years. And then you have Zach Hale, Matt West, and Sarah Barlock. Zach Hale and Matt West have been with us for a while. They're younger, but they're really good on the tech side. And then you have Jim Richardson, who's kind of in the area that I'm at with coaching outreach. And then Mike Odom is new. He's doing the contracts. But it's a fascinating how all this runs, and you do feel like you're making a huge impact on the game of baseball that you wouldn't get if you were coaching just your own team.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I can help coaches, parents, players, anybody, because I say this all the time. There's more than enough room in the pool for everybody. I love our community. Even outside the organization, I love our community because for the most part, I think people are willing to help each other. You talk about that being good teammates. I think if you stay in baseball long enough, you're going to have to be a good person, and you're going to have to be a good teammate, because if not, the game gets rid of you. The game weeds those people out. There's some outliers, and maybe some people that get through that aren't in it for the right reasons, but 98% of the people that are in the baseball community that have been in it for a long time are in it for the right reasons and more than willing to help someone that reaches out to help. And I'm excited. This is new. We're trying to line everything up, but I like the fact that it's new and that we're all going to go through it for the first time.
Yeah. I mean, you guys always did a great job with the AV. I mean, I was super impressed. We've been there. I think I've been to 3 of them. And this one was going to be a DC. Dang it. This was going to be right down the street from me.
It's the same AV company. Mike Harley does our AV. It's the same AV company. So even though we're bringing speakers here to record, it'll be the same look and feel. But now you have more access to the speakers because of the Q&As afterwards. And there's still going to be a social component. Like we can set up social rooms. I mean, for guys that want to hang out at night with each other, there's going to be avenues to be able to do that. Through the virtual platform, where, you know what, if you want to get a 6-pack and hang out till 3:00 in the morning via one of the side rooms, you can do that. It's not face to face. You're face to face. You're just not in, but you can still do all the social aspect of what people really like about the convention, and that's still going to have a little bit of that component as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you're doing I don't know how much say you personally have, but when you guys are discussing each year's convention, how do you break down who's speaking? How do you balance?
Our fourth vice president is in charge. So Rick Hitt, I feel bad for Rick, JUCO coach in Florida. Guys work their way into that. And so Rick worked his way into picking the speakers, and it is like your baby. So you feel bad for him that, okay, you work your tail off. You're trying to run your own program, but then you're trying to line the speakers up. And then it's virtual, but he's done an unbelievable job of getting people on board, getting them here. I run our youth stage, so I'm in charge of getting the youth stage speakers. So we're running through that right now. Everybody's good. Again, it's just a great sign of the baseball community. All of the guys, all 12 that I had lined up to speak in DC, not one of them hesitated. And we've got coach coming all the way from California. Not one guy hesitated on the virtual side of it that, no, I can't do it. Like, everybody stayed with it. And again, you're just appreciative of everybody willing to jump in, and it'll be good to see them out here too.
So do you think you guys will get back on track? Let's forecast a little bit. Do you think 2021, hopefully? And
I think Chicago will be unreal. It's Chicago 2021. It's at McCormick Place. This will be the first time in Chicago. I think everybody gripes about how cold it is.
It's terrible.
Now you go 4 or 5 years ago. I think Indianapolis was coldest ever. To think that Indianapolis was way colder than Chicago's ever been. But in 21, it's at McCormick Place. We have enough hotel rooms for everybody, regardless of how many people show up. No one's going to have to leave the McCormick Place.
Nice.
There's 2 million square footage of exhibitor space. We're going to be able to do some really cool things. I think we'll have a really good attendance this year. We already have, compared, you always make comparisons. I know everybody wants to say it's terrible. It's really not. We have as many people signed up for the convention right now than we did 2 years ago going to Dallas. Membership is above where we're usually at. So, like, all things considered, we're still moving in a great direction, but I think that's part of staying positive. You can say, COVID stinks, and but that's not going to get you anywhere. Play the cards you're dealt and then pivot and try to find a way to make it great, regardless of what you're dealing with. We all go through tough things. Try to find a way to make it great, regardless of what's going on. And again, I'm excited about it. I think we're going to look up a month after January 6th through the 10th and figure out that it wasn't as bad. Like, I think you always think about the worst sometimes, but that it was a great event. And we're all also able to now take an on-site one and still make some virtual components, because not every member we have, not every vendor we have is going to be able to come to Chicago. So we're probably going to be able to get them included a little bit more in 2021 because we've had to do a virtual in 2020. So I think that there's always going to be some positives that come out of it. And I think that'll be a huge one, is that we're still going to be able to keep people included if they can't show up for an on-site one in future years.
Gotcha. And is the goal always growth? I mean, do you guys want to be 100,000 strong at a convention, or is there a point where you're like, hey, this is probably as big as we want to be, even if we have this space, we want to cap it? And what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
and that's why we capped it last year. And I was brand new. I got thrown into the fire, got the job in late August and got here September 1. So we were still in the initial, like, okay, we're going to cap it, but what do we cap it at? Because it still is a customer service. Like it's still customer service on our end. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if you're a member, vendor. We're in the community service, we're in the service industry here. So we're trying to help people. Like, realistically, you can't have 20,000. We don't have enough people. Like, there's only 9 of us in the office. I don't know if everybody understands that. There's only 9 people in our office. So the bigger you get, you run into some service issues then, because you want it to be a great experience. I think that's what people have always enjoyed about the convention, is it's a great experience. Yes, people are going to have gripes here and there, but I don't know, you walk into 10 people, somebody's going to have a gripe about something, even if it's 60 and sunny out and it's great. Like, somebody's probably going to complain about something. Mm-hmm. But you don't want a ton of complaints, which is why we capped it last year, because Dallas, there were issues with people having to wait too long for food, people having to wait too long for the shuttles. So that's why there was a cap last year in Nashville, because it ended up being a customer service issue from Dallas the year before, because you want people to enjoy. If people are going to spend their money, if people are going to invest their money and show up,
vacations, a lot of
you
times.
Want it to be a great experience, because if it's not, then you feel like you've let people down, and you just don't want to let anybody down.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean,
you should do it in Nashville or Chicago every year.
I know. I think everybody says it, but you do want to spread it around. You want to move to Dallas sometimes, so it's easier for the California guys. And that's logistically, you want to move it around. Like, this year would have been great in DC, because you probably have some East Coast guys that maybe couldn't get to some of the other ones that can go to Washington, DC. So it would be great in Nashville every year, but you do want to, again, you want to be fair to every part of the country. If they're big enough to host us, you do want to spread it around. And we do sign our contracts out 6-7 years. The reason, people are like, why DC? It's an election year. Well, when you sign 6 years out, you do that to keep the hotel costs down. Mm-hmm. If we went year to year, everybody would be paying $300 to $500 in hotel rooms. Like, you're trying to keep the cost down. So we're still the cheapest national convention of any sport out there. We are the cheapest. We are the cheapest membership for what you get now for $5,600 worth of video content, and continuing to add more video content. For that to be $75. I talked to Mike Stosky the other day, who's at Mary Hardin Baylor. He's going to speak at our Barnstormers event at McLennan.
Good guy.
He's a great dude. He goes, Ryan, I don't understand why anybody would not be a member. Like, for what you get now, all the price breaks on rentals, hotels, you get liability insurance. Even just Inside Pitch, for me, Inside Pitch magazine, to get that is worth $75. But then you factor in all the other things, and the app now. With the app, we have a community going with the forums, and just the video access itself, for me is a no-brainer, because I still learn things. I spoke in 2012 in Anaheim. I did not watch it after I was done with it because I just didn't want to see it, but such great memories. You have so many great memories of the conventions and the speakers, and things pop up. You get constant reminders of how great it is.
Well, and for people who are griping about DC, you can bring your family, and if they don't want to do baseball stuff all day, they have a million free museums to go to. There's tons of green space. It's like the best. It's like the best day to do it. You have all this other stuff you can do that doesn't cost you another $500 for the weekend.
Yep.
There's Smithsonian all day, like tons of stuff.
Great city.
So yeah, it's a great city, and it's within like 3 hours of like a million other cities. So
Yes.
Go DC. Go DC.
Yeah, you don't realize that until I moved to Virginia, 9 hours away from Evansville. By the way, best thing I ever did was to go coach with Spanky McFarland, because I got a chance to be around somebody different that was way different personality. If you look at personalities, Jim Brownlee's here, Spanky McFarland is here as far as personalities. But you don't realize how close everything is until you move out to the East Coast, like DC to Philly to Atlantic City, to New York City, to Boston. Like you can get everywhere in a short amount of time, to Baltimore. Like everywhere is close. It's crazy.
So I guess the question is, when are we going to do one in Atlantic City?
I think softball
Never.
actually has done the one in Atlantic City, right? I don't know like square footage. The biggest thing is
Sun, right?
Hey, we're in Vegas, I think in 3 or 4 years.
It's also great choice. These are
great
because
we go Chicago, virtual this year, Chicago, then back to Nashville.
Oh,
and then I think Vegas.
I think
it's going to go virtual, Chicago, Nashville, and then I think Vegas.
Which you probably have all your travels stuff because I'm sure you travel a ton. But if you don't have an Amex Platinum, which gives you the lounges, the Centurion lounges, there's a Centurion lounge in Vegas. And me and my business partner, my former academy, we ate at least $250 worth of free, amazing food and free drinks in that lounge. So the next time you go to Vegas, make sure you have that card so you can go to the Amex lounges.
I'm still down on Amex. I had an Amex Blue after I got my master's. My wife and I were working through so much credit card debt, and Amex was the worst. So like I would never get a card of theirs.
Okay, understandable.
Yeah,
but you're really making it difficult to attend the events at the convention when you schedule in Nashville and Vegas.
You have choices to make, and that's part of being professional. That's part of being a professional. I think you tried to relay that to your players at times too. Like you have decisions to make as far as how you live your life, but if it's starting to flow into your professional life and the other things, then you have to be an adult and with adult decisions become adult consequences. So like if you can still run it, and there are guys that still handle that and still are there for the first bell. And us older baseball guys, you would be at a camp or you'd be at a recruiting deal, and you would learn from the older scouts and coaches is like, hey, if you're going to do this, you have to be the first person at the ballpark in the morning. And if you're not, you're a joke. You're an absolute joke. And I think it is the same thing with your teammates. Like teammates know, like they know who's out. And if you're the guy who's out and then you can't even get up in the morning, or you missed tarp duty, or you're late, then you're a joke. You're an absolute joke. So you know what? If you want to run it, that's fine. But you better be the first person at the ballpark the next day. And you better never be late. Because if not, that's part of knowing yourself. And, sometimes you have to use that as an excuse to make good decisions as an athlete. I think that's fine. You know what? Use coach. If you're a guy that can't handle being out and you can't handle peer pressure, hey, I'm not doing it because coach doesn't want me to do it. That's fine. Or use your parents. Like, that's okay. Like, there's ways to work around that. And again, I'm old now. I don't know how big peer pressure is now with the younger generation. I mean, it's through social, but I don't know as a social aspect how hard people are on now if they're not partying. I know back in the old days you would get it if you weren't partaking, but again, they also were good if you said, hey, I'm sorry, like I can't.
If you can be out till 4 and be the first one at weightlifting at 6, you're a legend, honestly. Like where do you get the energy?
My senior year of high school, I was too old to play Legion. I had a weird birthday, so I actually played up until I got to college. And I worked out with the men's basketball team that summer, and they had a player, Parrish Casabir, who was an All-American, but you could tell he hadn't been to bed yet, but his workouts were insane. Like, we would push the strength coach's car around the track. He would be just crushing squats and bench press, but you knew he'd been out all night. And you also knew he was pouring in like 30 points a game at the University of Evansville. So it's like, okay, that guy can do it. Not too many guys can do it. Eventually it catches up to you.
I think that's the next, as we wrap up here, I feel like if I had a suggestion for ABCA, this incorporating the legendary status of somehow in a booth.
ABCA after hours.
Yeah.
I thought about doing a podcast series called like Convention Stories. There's so many good ones. We all have them. A lot, and I do try to ask that question every once in a while of the guys that have been doing it a while, like what it's meant to them, and also like what the convention has meant. But there's so many good stories. That's how everybody has learned. There's a tribal aspect to it, where traditions and things get handed down from one generation to the next. And I know people can like discount the old traditions of baseball, but those still have values. Like how a scout went about his business, or how a recruiting coach went about his business, or an old hitting coach or pitching coach. Those stories still have value, and we need to continue to bring those to light, because it does help you get some inexpensive experience as a young coach to learn from other people's trials, and also know that Tim Corbin started as a GA somewhere and coached at Presbyterian College. It's great for people to see that, because if you only see national championship coach, you think like he fell out of the tree doing it that way. Everybody's had a long path to get to that point. So we need to still tell those old stories of baseball for the new generation of kids to see that like nobody comes fully evolved, nobody. And the best ones are still evolving and learning every day, the best ones. Tim Corbin's a great example of a guy that's still learning, still asks great questions, still responds. I owe a lot to that guy. He was an assistant at Clemson, and I asked him for his resume and he sent it to me. And I still always remember that. I said it when I spoke in 2012. I thanked him because he sent me his resume and he didn't need to do that. And he mailed it to me. Back then, email still wasn't that hot. So he mailed me a hard copy of his resume, and I used that template. And I still think part of that reason I got the Iowa job is my template on my resume was tremendous, because it was Tim Corbin's.
Well, Ryan, as we wrap up here, how can people stay in touch with you? Tell us a little bit about your podcast and your work, and where do you want to direct, hopefully some of our listeners that, keep following you?
Yeah, I'm easily accessible. Email rbrownlee@abca.org. Twitter, it's Coach B_ABCA. Instagram, rbrownlee17. And then if you're a member through the My ABCA app, my DMs are open. You can interact with me. I have people that email or reach out to me at all times with hitting plans. If you don't have the app is great. And I think there's some nuggets in there that a lot of people don't see. If you go into the resource center on the app, like my entire team manual that I gave our team at Western Illinois is in there, which there's some deep dive stuff in there. Travel checklist, which I don't think people think about at all. There's a travel checklist in there. There's practice plans in there. Anybody can reach out to me at any time. I have 20 years worth of external hard drive that has something that probably could help at some point. I came from a peak performance background, so I have a lot of peak performance stuff, but that's the best place to reach to me. And again, I'm here to help. It's a service job, so I'm here to service and hopefully help coaches and players accomplish their goals. That's awesome. By the way, congrats on 50 podcasts. That's awesome. Like, I know how difficult that is, and I still feel like an infant. I do want to, Jeremy Sheetinger helped me a lot when I first got here, because he had moved on to coaching and it was his equipment. And, Jack Warren, Jack Warren for me is, I think everybody owes Jack Warren a show of gratitude. he started Top Coach podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the initial, before anybody was really doing a lot of podcasting.
Yeah, I met Jack. I was on a show.
And I think
10 years ago.
he kind of showed that it was viable. Like I loved Top Coach because you got all the good stories and the good nuggets from coaches. I think everybody that is in the podcast baseball game right now owes Jack Warren a show of gratitude for where everything's at. Because again, I listen to a million different podcasts and we're all different. Everybody has different personalities. So, some people are going to gravitate differently to different podcasts. So, my voice is going to be good for some people, but not good for others. And so I think you get a little slice of everything in the baseball community with all the podcasts that are out there. I think it's phenomenal.
Bob, you want to send us off, sir? Speaking of different voices, I mean, Bobby and I, we butt heads. We haven't recently. We've had no political talk, but
that's why you haven't fought.
It's gonna heat up
soon. It's getting juicy.
And more vaccine talk. Just can't wait to hear Bobby's views on
stay
vaccine.
away.
It's coming up hot.
Really out him as a
Bobby, I've enjoyed our talks through the years, like the behind the deep dive stuff, with Windy City. And when I was recruiting, like I always appreciated your honesty. And I feel like you try to do things the right way. We need more of that. I really feel like you're in it for the right reasons and you are truthful. I know it's hard to be somebody out there right now that tries to speak the truth because most people don't want to hear it, but keep doing it because you're doing the right way.
I appreciate that. And I feel like as someone who does what I do, you have to tell the college coach, he's going to find out eventually. If the kid's not who you say he is, he's going to find out if he does end up taking him. And that's going to ruin your relationship for future kids that might have a shot to go play at those schools. But Ryan, really appreciate you coming on.
Anytime.
This was awesome.
Anytime. You need to get Tim and Jim Brownlee on.
He's the next phone call.
For Tim's those guys, you need to get both those guys on together. You probably don't need me for that because those guys coach together forever, but they have unbelievable stories. Talking about the convention and stories, those guys have unreal stories. And my dad has all the great details. Like he knows all the names, the places, like he's a great storyteller. So if you get in a bind, get my dad and brother on because they tell great stories.
I'm going to ask the hard questions about youth baseball tournament. Get ready, Tim.
He's similar. They're very similar to the rest.
He was always fair. He was always fair to our program. Like I never had any bad interactions with Tim, but tell you what, a lot of angry parents. Not necessarily always because of his fault or anything, but just it's a tough industry.
It's a tough industry. Yep.
So. Really is. Ryan, appreciate you coming on. We'll see everybody on Friday.
Yep. Perfect.